And if I was closed off and carrying this burden and I wasn't open to the beauty, I would have missed my life. And that's what we fought to do, is we fought to beat cancer so we can live. And you're still living while you're in treatment. So feel the feelings, mourn, get pissed, scream at the ocean. I did it all. But also let yourself feel there's happiness there and know that you will get to the end of it.
Hi, I'm Emery Kibler, and this is The Space Between. I'm a cancer survivor and a mom. And while those roles don't define me, they have shaped who I am. I created this space to share honest stories, expert insights, and meaningful support for families navigating life with cancer. If you're balancing treatment, caregiving, parenting, or just trying to hold it all together, you are not alone. This is your space to connect, to heal, and to feel seen, and I'm so glad that you're here. Today's guest on The Space Between is Sarrah Strimel Bentley, and y'all better get excited because her story is out of this world. You're not even going to believe what this woman has been through. She was a Broadway star on stage for 15 years, had an incredible career, met the love of her life, was like on top of the world when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And we're going to hear her story of how she navigated through treatment and her unique story to how she got to motherhood. This is like an on the edge of your seat cliffhanger kind of story. So get ready. Let's get started. Sarrah, I want to welcome you to The Space Between. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
So am I. I'm thrilled to be here with you and share my story.
And your story is absolutely incredible. I just had the joy of being on a 20-hour flight back from Australia, and I had downloaded a ton of your podcasts. So I was like, okay, I always like to listen to, my guests, but I did a binge where it was like, I've got the time. And I heard your story so many times, but every time I listened to it, it still brought up so much emotion in me, and listening to you and like, you're just warm and unique way of sharing and telling. There was always something new and something special that you were sharing in your story. And I think that's why people are so attracted to it. And from all of the cancer survivors that I speak to, I think it's just the joy that you're still bringing to your story and the hope and all of that in every conversation. It's really special.
Wow, thank you. What's interesting too is it's been 5 years now, right? So I've been cancer-free for 5 years. Well, no, 5.25 years at this point. And every time I tell the story, I remember different aspects because having gone through, this multi-year journey of breast cancer and of infertility and surrogacy and all the uncertainty, all the pain, all the trauma, and all the joy and all the love. And all of it together is like there was so much. It's like the biggest emotions you could feel in your life in such a finite amount of time that your brain and your heart can't comprehend them all. But going backwards now and looking back and speaking on it and advocating, and doing all the things that I do now. Yeah, each time I tell the story, a new memory surfaces. So it's just as important for me.
I feel the same way. And I realized when I was listening to all of your many podcasts that we have lots of things in common. Not that I was a Broadway star, because I can't sing or dance at all.
My word.
Definitely not. But we both were diagnosed and going through treatment during the pandemic, which is like a unique bummer, right? We both went through IVF at RMA, which, yay, both resulted in us having babies. Yay. And I'm so jet lagged. I'm like, what was the other thing? Oh my gosh, that our partners are both our rock and helped us to get through this and to find joy in all of those things together. So it also made it's so much more special to me listening, where I was like, it was triggering memories for me too. And 5 years later now, when I tell my story to people, always find new things where I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, I'm just now kind of able to deal with that feeling or see it in a new light or understand why it was such a complicated feeling, because it is that, especially when you're talking about bringing in this unique motherhood journey that you had too, where it's like everything that you wanted, you're getting at the same time that you're losing so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's very true. It's two things can be true at once. And I think that, again, you can be into that most painful, hardest thing, but at the same time, be the best moment of your life. It's wild.
Well, why don't you start from the beginning in case anyone hasn't heard your story? Tell us about your time as a Broadway star all the way up to your diagnosis.
Yes. Hello, wonderful listeners of The Space Between. So the space between me telling my story and you listening. So yes, I'm Sarrah Strimel Bentley. I am 44. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and we have a house on Long Island. So we split our time, we being my husband and I, which I just gave a spoiler alert, but we've been here for 20 years, myself 20, my husband a little less. Yeah, so I moved to New York City out of college. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I moved to New York out of the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music to be on Broadway. That was my dream. My dream was to sing, dance, and act on the Great White Way. And I left college 5 credits short of graduating because the producers, the Mel Brooks musical, called. And when Broadway calls, you listen. So I went on tour and left school. I never graduated. And I went on to do 7 Broadway shows for 15 years. And it was amazing and glamorous. And then I realized that there were other things in life to do. And I really wanted to have agency. I wanted to rely on myself. And I landed on opening up my own yoga brand. And it started in the Hamptons in 2016. In 2019, signed up for another dating app, The League, and I met a man named James Bentley. And we were 38, both of us, our birthdays are 2 months apart. We fell in love. And I was like, oh my God, finally, the man who I will have babies with. And then the pandemic happens. And James and I decide after only a few months of dating that we're going to quarantine together with my parents in Florida. We're thinking it would be a week or 2. Go to Florida, it's 3 months. And it was a horrible time in the world. It was terrible. And in some ways, it set me up for what was to come because there was also there was so much pain and I lost friends and we all lost people. But yet I was falling in love and I was with my family and we had time of cooking and joy. And so there were these weird things happening at the same time. And James and I decided it was time to go back to New York together. Move in together. We bought a house together in the Hamptons without ever seeing it. So that was kind of a commitment, right? We had talked about the kids we were going to have in my life. August 4th of 2020, we moved into this house in the Hamptons. I also moved into his apartment in the city. And it was like, man, all that I wanted is finally here. All that I dreamt of, all that I've worked towards. And then 3 weeks later, I was walking down. There's a path to the beach. We live across the street from the water. It's beautiful. We were walking the dog. We have a Boston Terrier named Glory, like we did every night at sunset. And I had an itch under my armpit. I went down to scratch the itch. And sure enough, there was a lump the size of a walnut. I'm like, what the heck is this? I asked James, I'm like, have you ever felt this? New couple in love. Obviously, he's touched my breasts more than a few times. And he was like, no, babe, I would have felt that. That feels big. It came out of nowhere. That's got to be like a cyst or a clogged milk duct. I don't know, something, right? Didn't make sense that they're pregnant, but go with it. We're like, it's nothing. So I call and make a telehealth appointment with my gynecologist because, we're still in COVID. It's August. And so she gets on the phone with me and she says, you have no family history. You're only 38. You're very fit. You're very healthy. This is nothing, but let's just get an ultrasound just to be safe. Someone will call you to schedule it. Someone calls and they say, okay, so we're going to give you your ultrasound on December 6th. I was like, whoa, it's August. They're like, it's the pandemic. That's as much. This is
You're like, no.
Yeah. They're like, here, this is nothing. This is not important. This is just to be sure. And I'm like, something felt very off. I knew that.
Yeah. How were you feeling when you found the lump and your doctor told you that this is probably nothing? What were you thinking? What was your intuition there?
So what I was thinking was, you're right, definitely sure this is nothing. There's no way this could be something. I had a friend diagnosed with breast cancer I had run into right before the world shut down. I ran into her in Miami at a club. And I remember I hadn't seen her for a year. And I said, where were you? And she goes, oh, I had breast cancer. So I went to James, we were dating. And I said, oh my God, I ran into my friend. She had breast cancer. She's 33. This is wild. Little did I know. So I felt like, my front brain was like, no, this is totally nothing. And all my friends and all my family, they're like, this is totally nothing. But when I would drive in my car alone on my way to, go teach yoga and stuff in the Hamptons, when I would go alone, I was like, this is not nothing. I feel like this is, I'm really scared. Yeah. And there was no standout factor that it was like a deep knowing. I know my like,
so well inside of you. And you're like, I know I'm too young. I know I'm too fit. I know I take too good of care of myself, but there's something inside of me that knows.
Yeah, that didn't want you, but I did. And so I set about calling and trying to get it pushed, and they could only push it to October. And I made the decision to voice displeasure to a client of mine who happens to just be one of the richest people in the country. And she said, how are you? I'm like, I've been better. She goes, what's going on? You're always happy. And I said, well, I kind of found a lump in my breast and I can't get a test. And she said, and then she picked up her phone and she dialed, and literally within a minute, she was on the phone. She goes, yeah, she's driving it. This was in Southampton. She goes, she's driving into the city right now. She'll be on your table in an hour and a half. I don't care. I don't care where you are. She'll be there. Got me into a private radiology firm. I had a mask, a sports bra on, leggings, and flip-flops. And she put me in my car. She gave me a shirt. And I drove to this private radiology firm. I get to the door and they say, we do not take any insurance. I had insurance. So I'm like, what? And it's just, we don't take insurance. And I almost turned around and went back because I was like, I didn't work this hard to build this business to blow 20 grand, or whatever in my brain on this test I probably don't need, knowing that I needed it, in my
right.
core. And so I took a deep breath and I walked through the door and I saved my own life that day. I got my ultrasound and they immediately, she was like trying to be stone-faced and she went into my armpit. And I'm like, why should she go in my armpit? Because I didn't know anything at this point. I was so innocent on this whole thing. Got on the phone, get her in a mammogram now. And then I'm like, whoa, I'm reading the room. I'm like, this is bad. Something is bad. So I start sobbing. And then they ultrasounded essentially my entire torso. And I'll come to find out later, she was trying to see if it had spread. Because she knew what she saw, which was breast cancer. And I walked out of that office that day with an appointment with one of the Freudian slip, one of the best breast surgeons in the world. And, the radiologist was like, just in case. But she knew. Everybody knew. It was Labor Day weekend, so I had to wait the whole weekend.
It's always a holiday weekend.
Before I could get my biopsy, which I got then on Monday, which before Dr. Drossman, who's, diagnosed Katie Couric, she's again one of the best, before she went in and did I think over 10 needle sticks in my armpit and in my breast, she said, I'm going to call you tomorrow and I'm going to tell you something and I need to prepare you for that. I'll never forget. I had my breasts out. James was holding my arm over my head. And I looked at her and I said, I have breast cancer. And she goes, yeah, you do. She goes, I know what this is. And I'm sobbing. They proceed to do the biopsy as I'm like life flashing before my eyes. And then the next day, September 1st of 2020, I would get diagnosed with stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma, breast cancer.
And so you just said James was holding your hand, so he was with you in the biopsy. So you guys were still in a pretty new relationship when all of this was going on. I mean, this is super heavy.
9 months in. And why I go back to what I had said a few minutes ago, which was that, we went through a global pandemic. We moved in with my parents. He and I experienced a relationship issue very early on where I had a choice to forgive him for something. I chose to, and we worked through some really kind of gnarly stuff. And so by the time this happened, it almost felt like, and James will tell you the same thing, he was like, let's do this, But I had a fear of like, oh my God, he's going to leave me, obviously. I'm broken. I have cancer. And this is before I even heard of any of the fertility stuff that goes along with the breast cancer diagnosis. But yeah, that man was like in the foxhole with me from the very, very second I got off that table after that ultrasound. He was back in the Hamptons with our dog. He took himself on a train, got right to the city, and just held me all night as I cried.
It sounds like every month of your relationship was like 3 years.
Well, they say, right? They say COVID was what, like 10 in one? It like adds 10 years to our relationship or something?
It felt like it. I mean, that, and I also find like I talk to so many people who have either had their relationships totally blown up because of cancer or just completely like brought them so much together, or people who have even gone through divorce in the different ways that I just find that it really magnifies what's really in your heart and who you are, right? It shows your true self. Like if you're that person that is really there and you're in it, it just like, that is who you are, and it becomes like 100-fold. And it sounds like that's what happened with you and James.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, certainly. Because in that moment of fear and panic, every time he had an opportunity to peace out, he showed up. And the one crystallizing moment, which I do talk about a lot, and I usually can't do it without crying, so I said, here we go, was, so I get diagnosed with cancer. I see the best breast surgeon in the world, Dr. Alyssa Port. She gets me a plan. And she's like, this is what we're going to do. And so once we devise our plan, the next breath, she said, you two look like you're madly in love. I think I was actually sitting on his lap when she walked into the room. And we said, yeah. And she goes, do you want kids? And we both were like, yes, we do. And she said, okay, you're going to go, I'm going to make you an appointment today. You're going to go to RMA and you're going to meet with Dr. Klopperman, who was golfing because we were still at a holiday weekend. He was like not there. He was like on a golf trip. So I ended up in the office of Dr. Erkan Buyuk, who would later, become the man that would change my life. One of the many people involved in bringing a child here. And yeah, he looked at me and he has this very thick European accent. And he was like, you can freeze your eggs or you can freeze embryos together. What do you want to do? Embryo is better for you, And I looked at James because I'm like, okay, now we really are truly putting all of our eggs in James' basket, right? Like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. We are.
You really were.
Every single opportunity for me to be a biological mother, right? A mother of a biological child. I looked at him and James, without a beat, just those embryos. See, I'm crying. I'm doing it. It's crying.
I know. And I'm just like imagining you holding your breath, asking that question and looking at him and being like, please say embryos, please say embryos, please say embryos.
100%. And so he did. And then I said, okay, embryos. Now, don't you think for a second in the weeks that followed, I had my double mastectomy, and with my drains still in from that, we started the shots for IVF. I mean, it was bam, 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 no time to waste. In those weeks before we started our IVF process, while I was going through healing from just, a casual double mastectomy, there were nights where he was like, are you sure you don't want to just freeze a couple eggs? And I was like, are you not sure about me? I was like, you don't know. And he goes, no, baby, I'm sure. I love you. I'm all in. And I was like, what do you mean? So this, it obviously was, he just wanted to make sure that I was sure. And I just wanted to make sure that he was sure.
Yes. And he must have just been like holding so much together, trying to understand where you were and all the things that you were going through and what's happening and like thinking about the future and like all of those things. It's so many things to hold together in the same time in this like new space where you love each other so much and you both want the best for each other. But it's like you couldn't even have at that point guessed where you were going and what was going to happen. When at that point, you probably thought like, okay, we're in the thick of it. This is the punchline of the story. But no, the punchline of the story is even still to come at that point. Like you were just finding out that your fertility was affected and that you're going to have to go through this process. You had no idea what was going to happen.
No,
I'm kind of sitting on the edge of my chair waiting for you to continue with the story.
I know. I was like, let me just like, I'll road through it. No,
yeah.
You know what I didn't know at the time either, which is a whole other thing. I didn't know when we were going through all this, but he knew. The cards in his pocket is he had been shopping for rings since July. Okay, so he'd been shopping for rings before breast cancer was a character here. And I didn't know that when I was sitting in the fertility office, so him saying embryos and me trusting that, he'd already
made up his mind. He was in.
Yes. And I didn't know that because we didn't get engaged until I was bald mid-chemo in December. So to go back, double mastectomy, start the IVF at RMA with a different doctor. First round of IVF, I get like 12 eggs. And we make one PGT tested healthy embryo, which means one embryo that was genetically normal that would be a good candidate to have a baby with. So we froze that embryo. Second round, we went dead ahead into as soon as we could. Same thing, got a ton of eggs, came out with one embryo that was PGT tested abnormal. So 2 rounds of IVF, one embryo. And Dr. Buyuk asked me, he said, and this embryo, by the way, I don't know if you guys listening, I know this is primarily a cancer, driven podcast. I don't know how much fertility we talk about here, but like they grade your embryo. So the embryo was graded day 7 AC embryo, which apparently is just fair quality. Not a good.
What does just fair quality mean? Because I heard you saying that.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember what quality. I feel like I had some really good quality embryos that didn't pan out, to be honest with you.
Right.
So what did they say to you when they use the word fair quality?
Right. Well, yeah, you and me both. That's all they said, fair quality. And you know why? Thank God he didn't start talking numbers. And thank God I didn't start Googling numbers. I mean, I did. Listen, I did some deep dives on day 7 AC, but I also didn't go so deep. And I subscribed to this mantra from most of this experience, which was, I honestly didn't want to know too much. I wanted to get through it. I trusted my team. I trusted the science. I trusted my support system. And I didn't want to start going down a rabbit hole, which would only really completely make my mental state that much more unstable, right? So day 7 means, the AC, the A is whatever the embryo itself, and one is the sac around it, right? The amniotic sac. So each of these grades means that they have a percentage chance of working. Instead of me finding that out, James and I were like, listen, we have one embryo. This is our chance. We have one chance to have a baby. And I was like, well, obviously, this baby's name is Chance. So we named our embryo Chance. Dr. Buyuk asked, do I want to know the sex? And I said, certainly. And we knew it was a boy. So we have Chance, the boy embryo, frozen in Midtown.
I teamed up with Stacey Eagle and Elise Ryan to create Sea Waves of Support, healing selenite bracelet sets. You keep one and gift the other to someone facing cancer or life's challenges, a powerful reminder they're not alone. Learn more at seawavesofsupport.com. So what did you think was going to happen next? Did you think that you were going to go through the IVF process and carry the baby and all of those things?
Yeah.
At what point did you find out?
Yeah. So I had known that surrogacy might be a possibility, that there's a possibility that I might not be able to carry this one embryo. Because my friend, who I referred to earlier in Miami at the club, when I got diagnosed, she was like mid-surrogacy journey.
It's just crazy, though, that you had a friend who went through something so similar before you, because I'm sure before you started on your cancer journey, you probably hadn't seen even very many women who went through breast cancer that seemed like you. Like this was probably something so far from your mind. And then here you meet someone who's in your universe, around your age, going through breast cancer and also the fertility journey and using a surrogate? What are the chances?
What are the chances? The word chance now resonates so deeply in my life. I always am like, chances, because at this point in 2020, women were using their social media platforms in the way they are now to talk about breast cancer or female health or fertility or infertility. And so I desperately scoured the internet for hashtag breast cancer for girls that look like me, younger women who maybe on the back end are showing that they're living a healthy, full life, women that have children after. I couldn't find a lot. And so, yeah, what are the chances that my friend, now that we're talking about this, and unfortunately now that the cases of breast cancer in young women are just rising, and we have hypotheses why, but we don't know for sure. I have so many friends of mine before, not breast cancer friends, longtime friends that are getting breast cancer, college friends, high school friends. I mean, it's happening all around us. So I guess the chances now are 1 in 8 that I would know someone. But yeah, she was a big source. Her name's Victoria. And she was a big source of wisdom for me in this journey. So I didn't know going into chemo. I knew I had 1 embryo. And my oncologist said, listen, 8 rounds of ACT chemo, hardcore chemo. We're going to give you a shot that shuts your ovaries down to protect them during chemo. You're 38. There's a chance on the back end of chemo, we may have some fertility left. You might have some eggs, in there. You might have some follicles. We're going to wait a year-ish, after you're done with your active treatment. You'll go back to RMA, to Dr. Buyuk, and we'll look. We'll do another round of IVF, right? And we'll talk about what's next. So we did that. A year after active treatment, I went to RMA, and this may be a pivotal one. This might have been the hardest day of this entire experience. Let me tell you, I went through a double mastectomy. I went through 8 rounds of ACT chemo, 28 rounds of radiation, 3 years of hardcore meds after that to keep me from recurring, 3 more surgeries after that. And the day I went back to RMA to see if there were any follicles left, and I looked at the screen during the ultrasound, and instead of, I call your ovaries chocolate chip cookies. Each ovary is the cookie, and then your chips are your egg follicles. And I had no chips. It was just a black. And I knew. And I'll never forget looking at that screen and looking at Dr. Buyuk. And I love him because he's just straight up Eastern European honest. And he was like, we cannot do another. He goes, we can. He said, we can do it. But nothing will happen. And it is a waste of your time and your energy. And it's a waste. It's not happening. And I went home that night and I cried so hard. We were living in a high rise down the street. I like wailed, and James held me. Security was called because they thought someone was getting injured in our apartment. And it was me just like mourning all of it.
Your heart was just breaking.
Broken. Like, I cry now thinking of it. It's like, it was because then I knew I had 1 chance. Like, before I was holding on to,
there could be hope. Like, maybe there's a few left. Like, maybe we could do another round. Maybe there's going to be another one.
It's interesting that you said that could be hope. There could be hope because the second round of the IVF, where we got the embryo that wasn't normal, we prayed on every needle, every stick of the medication. We prayed, and we're not like big religious people, but we prayed to have a girl in this second round. And we named that girl. We named the embryo that we got that wasn't normal. We didn't even know if it was a girl, but we just, in our hearts, we named it Hope.
Oh my gosh.
And Hope. And so Hope had to be discarded, right? They use that word, which is why we don't, it's a whole nother conversation about peoplehood of embryos. But to me, it was Hope. And I found out on a podcast with Dr. Buyuk only a year ago. I finally asked him, I said, hey, that embryo that wasn't normal, was that a boy or a girl? Because he's looking at his screen on my chart. And he goes, you want me to tell you right now? And I said, yeah. He goes, it was a girl.
Oh my God. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So Hope is like our guardian angel up here, right? So we have Hope, who was our other embryo. And, she's in our lives. Trust me, I talked to her. I'm like a little woot woot, guys who's listening. I'm a woot woot hoot hoot.
I'm on the same woohoo train with you. All of the prayers, all of the crystals, everything. Non-denominational. I'll take any help I can get.
Right. All of it. No, all of it. I pull from every religion, every which way,
Yes.
So yeah. So, that night we have one embryo. Chance is frozen. And then I went back to my oncologist and I said, okay, there's nothing left. No more IVF, no more nothing. I said, what do we do now? And I said, can I carry this baby? And she goes, Sarah, here's the deal. At this point, now I'm 40. Okay. So I'm 40 years old. I have one embryo that's fair quality. I cannot, in her words, with her blessing, try to do an embryo transfer until I'm 43 because she wants me to be on my meds for 5 years because I had a very high risk, very gnarly tumor DNA. Goes very aggressive. She goes, if you want, I'll let you try to carry a baby at 43. So now I have no ovaries. Oh, they took my ovaries out after they realized,
Because, you don't need those anymore.
No, there's nothing there. And I have a genetic mutation where I am predisposed to ovarian cancer. So, we don't need them. Get them out. So I have no ovaries. I'm, 40, I'll be 43 at one embryo. She's like, why would you, that's really just not, can you do a surrogate? And I was like, fuck. So I said, I can't carry this kid. She goes, you can, but you've never been pregnant. This is not the ideal environment at this point. And I said,
with one shot.
I was not, can I curse on your podcast?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I was not fucking around. I was like,
no.
Yeah, one shot with the love of my life who I'd waited this long for. Yeah. So we then we knew it was time to find this angel.
And how do you find a surrogate?
Oh boy. Again, thank you, Victoria, for leading me through this wonderland of things. You interview agencies. If you don't have an immediate family member or a friend, that wants to carry for you, which is a whole other pile of stuff that comes with that, guilt if it doesn't work, whatever, you find an agency and you pay the agency $25,000 to $40,000 to matchmake you and your husband or partner or wife with the person that is going to carry your child. And so we interviewed agencies. Some of them were bad used car salesmen who would prey on your fears that they kept being like, you only have one. So if you do the VIP experience for an extra 60.
What is a VIP experience?
This was wild. So this is a very well-known agency that I know people have used them. The director of this agency, she's like, okay, this is the cost. But for an extra $60,000, you could do the VIP journey. And of course, I'm sitting next to James. We're on a Zoom call. I said, what's the VIP journey? She said, well, you'll get a top-of-the-line surrogate. What? So then I kind of leaned back and I said, top of the line. And then in my brain, I'm like, so what? For $40,000, we're going to get the bottom of the barrel. This is a human being we're talking about.
And if they think they're bottom of the barrel, how did they accept them into their agency?
This is what I mean. There is no, how do you categorize this? In her brain, she was trying to say is that we would get an experienced surrogate, which, by the way, has no bearing on whether they get pregnant or not. And we would skip the lie. So we would cut all the other families. So I was like, this is not the agency for me. Absolutely not. I'm not. And she kept fear-mongering me. I'm like, this is insane. But we found an amazing agency out of Boston. They're the oldest surrogacy agency in the country. CSED, Center for Surrogacy and Egg Donation. And we trusted them. They were honest and they knew what they were doing. And they started matching us. And we matched with a woman from Boston who was 21. And we went through the process of flying her to New York and having all the tests and doing all the things. And she was actually living in the city my husband was born in. So for me, I'm like, oh, this is it. This is the person. And physically, there was a very stringent set of things that she had to match from my doctor, because we did only have this one embryo, right? Like more than usual.
Mhm.
There was a very specific set of things that needed to be present. And so she was this, to me, I'm like, this is the unicorn. And then she ghosted us. She disappeared. She ghosted the agency. And I was heartbroken because we got ghosted the summer of 22. So we had started working with her in the beginning of 22. So now we're like 2.5 years into this journey, right?
And you just invested so much time and so much of your heart and so much hope into this person.
Yeah. And also, everyone's like, are you going to talk to any adoption agencies? Because for James and I, and this is a very personal decision for every couple, if our embryo didn't work, the logical to people next step would be to get an egg donor, right? So we have a baby, we can make embryos that are James's DNA, and then a donor that perhaps looks like me or talks like me, whatever it is that's important to us. And we spoke to James and I as well, but more so James. He was very much, I don't want a baby that is like half us. I don't want you to feel like it's missing you. I would rather have a baby that we adopt and that we raise together, as our own. And I agreed. But I didn't start, like, why don't you make sure, in case this doesn't work? And I said, this is work.
You can't.
Right.
You're in it.
I know a lot of people that actually were doing it all at the same time. I just wasn't. I was all the eggs in one basket. I'm also counting down to the day where I find out if this embryo is going to be our baby or not. So every day that goes by is another day longer. I have to wait for either the best day of my life or the worst. Dream of becoming a biological mother, which I've had forever. This is what's going to happen. So yeah, and the ghosting of the surrogate really knocked me down.
So what happened then? How did you find your right surrogate?
Or here's the best part. You can't even write this story. This woman ghosted me. She called me a month later and told me why. Because her fiance also they had a very young 1-year-old, left her one day. And she's crying, I'm fine. And she's like, I was terrified to tell you, Sarah, but I couldn't do this on my own. I said, I wouldn't have let you, to be honest. So, I gave her my blessing. She was really brave to just a month later show up, call. And so the agency says, you know what? We're looking for this it's got to be a unicorn because you have all these stipulations, right? They go, we know the perfect woman and she would love you and you would love her, but she's already matched. But her couple is in London and they've kind of ghosted her too. So let me call the couple and see what the heck's going on. They're dragging their feet. She really wants to, make this happen. And sure enough, she got ghosted by her intended parents. We got ghosted by our surrogate. He calls overjoyed a couple months later in October. We got ghosted in early August. Calls in October. Okay, they've unmatched. She wants to meet you. And her name is Whitney. And she lives in Richmond, Virginia. So we met her, and she was a bubbly, gorgeous, beam of light human being with a great sense of style. Not that it matters, but to me, I thought, And we had Mexican food, a margarita, and we decided then and there that this is what we were going to do together. And, the rest is history.
And I feel like I've said this 1,000 times while we've been talking. What are the chances? What are the chances of all of these things, of all of these stars aligning? And honestly, if you were writing this for Netflix, I'd be like, okay, that could not really happen.
Right. So if anyone's listening from Netflix, let's make it happen. Yeah. So we matched with Whitney, and then my doctor denied her.
What?
Yeah, because she had 2 miscarriages instead of 1. And that knocked her out of the running in his mind. He didn't want anything. If this didn't work, he didn't want us to ever go back and say we could have done better. So I got a second opinion from a friend who was a fertility specialist, a very good one of the best too. And she gave it to me straight. She's like, if this doesn't work, it has nothing to do with her. She's wonderful, Sarah. Everything on paper, she's wonderful. So she had 1 more miscarriage. She has 2 healthy kids. It's your embryo. If this doesn't work, it's your embryo. And I was like, But also, I knew this was the woman. So I went back and I told Dr. Buyuk, and I'm like, this is who we're going with. Sorry. I know it in my heart. So we did the transfer. Easter Sunday, well, we did it Monday, but Easter Sunday, she came to New York of 23. Did the transfer, did the 2-week wait, where I don't drink anymore, but I was drinking a lot of wine because it was like, how do you hold this day that's about to come where you're going to find out if it's everything you ever wanted or you're going to, never have this opportunity again. And we got a phone call from the head of the surrogacy agency that she's pregnant. The miracle had happened.
And you brilliantly recorded this into the most emotional. And I saw the video when it first came out and I was like, oh my God, yay, like so happy. And then when we were reintroduced watching it again, I'm like, just so happy for you and that moment that you had and that you were able to record it so you could even see it happening for yourself too.
Yeah, and I'll explain why. So when I had breast cancer, did the breast cancer diaries because I wanted any woman that's ever diagnosed to look at these stories when I went through breast cancer and know that they're going to be okay. They're going to get it real. They're going to know that there can be love. There can be engagements while you're bald. There can be, you can have sex during what I mean? Like I want them to know that life is happening and joy is there. And I also want them to know that there are hard days. Like I wanted to tell it like it was. And I was committed to honesty in this. So I did the surrogacy diaries as well. And they began when we began the surrogacy process. So I knew that no matter what that phone call was, that the surrogacy diaries would have to reflect that because that's real life. And so I set up my camera knowing that I was going to post whether it was what it was, which was ended up being every time I can't even think about the video without crying. And or it was going to be me on camera in probably what would have been one of the hardest moments of my life. Yeah.
So. That is so brave to put yourself in the most vulnerable position I can possibly imagine, knowing that you have no way of knowing what's happening and you're allowing people to be there with you and to share in this either greatest moment of your life or probably the worst moment of your life.
Yep. I committed to it, right? And I knew how important those breast cancer diaries had become to women who reached out every day. And I wanted to be the same kind of advocate for the journey of the fertility portion, onco-fertility journey.
And so what has your motherhood journey been like now?
Yes, guys. So the baby came safely and healthfully at 10 pounds. It's like motherhood is so everything. I keep saying that you would never get to experience something this. I'm crying again. Gosh darn it. I love feeling all the feelings. It's great. You would never get to experience something this magical without it being this hard too, because you don't get things that great, right? They don't come.
No, you have to work for things that are that great. And you just learn that in the years coming up to that with all of your journey that you went through with cancer and the emotional roller coaster, but it doesn't stop when you go into motherhood. It's on a daily basis, the highs and the lows.
Yeah. It's the greatest gift I could ever be given. And I do go back in the really hard moments. Some of the times I lose it, but a lot of the times when he won't nap and he's screaming. And yesterday he had an orange and he said, "Open, please." And then I opened it and then he lost his mind. And then I gave him an unpeeled orange. And in one hand he had the peeled orange and the other he had the unpeeled and he was still crying. And I was like, I don't know what else to do. And then I stopped and I just sat on the ground with him and looked at him. And I was like, I just took a breath and I'm like, you're a miracle.
You're a miracle.
Every prayer of millions of people prayed with us. Everybody that followed my journey to get him here were praying. So I'm like, Jesus, you are the product of every prayer in the world together. And so, yeah, I it's he's got a lot of legs to stand on. He's like, look, lady, I'm a miracle. What are you going to yell at me? You're going to yell at him? And I'm like, oh, God. But yeah, and so lucky every single day. Like you said, you couldn't have written this And so I remind myself of the gratitude I have for this experience I get to have as a mom. And it's just, and that I get to be here, right?
Yes. And you've created a 501 in Chance's name, right?
Yeah, well, yes, it was called A Damn Good Life. So I renamed it. I created, co-founded with Victoria, who I was talking about on this podcast.
Oh my gosh.
Her and I said we want to do something that hasn't been done yet because there was support for egg freezing, financial support for egg freezing. There was financial support for helping women get to and from treatment. There's financial support. 5 Under 40 is an amazing organization that helps women under 40 get wigs, get counseling. And so these things existed, but what didn't exist was how do you pay $150,000 and you can't put it on credit? That's the average cost of a surrogacy journey. So imagine going through cancer, imagine going through all these rounds of IVF, and then imagine not being able to afford to bring the baby here. Like that to me would be soul crushing.
It's a tragedy.
Yeah. So we were like, okay, that's what we need to do. And then another breast cancer survivor who was our friend before, Annie, joined up. So the three of us started A Damn Good Life because my company is called Damn Good & Co. So, we built off what I had built. And then, the BlackRocks of the world don't want to give a check to Damn Good Life. So we changed it to A Chance for Life. And we raise $150,000 at this point annually. We'd love to raise more than that so we can give more than one family a baby. But we pay soup to nuts everything. So we give you all the money you need to get this done and get this baby here. And our first couple, it took them 2 years to match and get to transfer. But the most exciting news is I just announced it today, actually on Instagram, is that they have the heartbeat of their baby. I announced, the surrogate got pregnant. I announced it. People flipped out. That was before Christmas. But now they heard the heartbeat. So the baby is safely on the journey here. And to say that we helped literally
bring this baby into the world. Yes. And give hope and then give them a chance. All those things together.
Hope and a chance.
Oh, it's so incredible. Hope and chance. And so how can people donate? Do you do just is it fundraisers or can they just donate online?
Yeah. Please give us your money if you have any. No. So we have a website, achanceforlife.org. You can also donate. The links are everywhere. They're in all of my social media bios to go. And it's right through the website. Also, we do fundraisers. We don't have one on the calendar right now, but you can get all the updates by following me on my page, which is Sarrah Strimel Bentley on Instagram and on TikTok. And we have a Chance for Life profile as well. So we don't starve you of any opportunities to hear about what we're doing.
And is there any last words or advice that you want to leave for anyone that's just been diagnosed with cancer?
I have this concept I call it joy mining, right? So it's not toxic positivity because that I can't stand. I don't know if you've listened to this whole podcast, you could probably tell I'm not that girl. But I am a very joyful person and you can still find joy even during your cancer journey and in survivorship and beyond. Sometimes it feels harder to find, but it's there and you can still live your life. Because I always say, those years of my life I spent in treatment and in the unknown of, am I going to be a mom, biological mom of a biological child? So much happened there that was so beautiful. And if I was closed off and carrying this burden of and I wasn't open to the beauty, I would have missed my life. And that's what we fought to do, is we fought to beat cancer so we can live. And you're still living while you're in treatment. So, I just encourage everyone to just feel the feelings, mourn, get pissed, scream at the ocean. I did it all. But also let yourself feel there's happiness there and know that you will get to the end of it. And, God willing, that you will have a long, wonderful life ahead.
That is such good advice because you're right. You don't want to miss all of the happy moments and all the great stuff that happens, even when you're feeling super crappy, right? You could blink and you're going to miss some of that great stuff too. And allowing that joy to really help to carry you through. I think it's like a superpower.
Why? I agree.
Well, oh my gosh, I can't even believe that an hour has gone by.
All I did was talk, and I was like, Omri, I want you to talk too, girl.
Oh my gosh, this story is so amazing.
Thank you. I know. I couldn't have written it. Trust me. I didn't see that coming. I was like, all right, I'm going to get married to this guy. We'll have some kids. Life will
this will all be great. And we're going to live our fantasy life.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's the thing. It's what you don't see coming can change your entire life, in ways you will never even understand until it happens. And I now this is my purpose. I do motivational speaking. I moderate panels. I advocate for women who come after me. And that is my passion. And that is my full heart. So yeah, make your message, as Robin Roberts would say.
Amazing. Well, if this podcast has inspired you or uplifted you, give us a like and a follow, and give us a review on Apple or Spotify or YouTube. And you can follow us on Instagram at thespacebetween_cancer.family. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode of The Space Between. If this show brought you comfort or a sense of community, I'd love for you to subscribe and share it with anyone who might need it too. You can join the conversation on Instagram at thespacebetween_cancer.family and head to amory.kibler.com for more resources designed to support parents navigating cancer. Just remember, you're never alone. This podcast is here as a companion on your journey towards healing, growth, and connection.